Okay, welcome everybody to today's presentation of Skinny Old Cats. This is race approved. Our presenter today is Dr. Elizabeth Colleran. She is a feline specialist board certified by the American Board of Veterinary Practitioners. She teaches feline medicine around the world and has successfully created, owned, and managed two exclusively feline practices. Dr. Colleran is a published author and frequent contributor to several peer-reviewed publications. She has been a media spokesperson on a number of feline topics for communications campaigns and has proudly mentored many aspiring feline practitioners. Her next book for veterinarians, The Senior Cat, Medicine and Management in the Golden Years, still a working title, will be published in 2020. Welcome, Dr. Colleran.
Thank you. As I was preparing to give this talk, I went and looked at my population of patients in the practice, and about 40% of my patients in this practice are over 12 years old. So this is a giant population of our cat patients and a very important part of it. So to start, I want to go back and explain why cats are so different and why their nutritional needs are far different than other animals. They are an animal that came into our lives 10,000 years ago as a preferential hunter in the areas where we were beginning to gather up grain. And as we gathered up grain, that attracted rodents, and the cats thought that that was a terrific buffet for them. They didn't become a companion to us until about 4,000 years ago, and the first evidence of that was in Egypt. One of the most interesting things to me, though, is the earliest evidence of domestication of the cat was found in Cyprus. And Cyprus is the most famous island on the planet because it's the only one that at no time in the history of the earth did it have a land bridge. So cats came to Cyprus with people on boats. And in Cyprus was found the first burial site. It was a formal burial site of a man who was buried with the things that were typically buried with people that were of high class, and he had things to take with him into the next world. And among those was a very carefully buried companion cat that was buried right next to him. And that was at 7500 BCE, so even before we found evidence of domestication. So cats have been with us for a long time. And they came to us in response to these guys, the domestic mouse, or musculus. These are mice that are unique to us, and they are only found around us because we provide the kind of warm, protected environment where they can find abundant food. And so this particular species of mouse is the reason why cats became part of our lives. However, unlike every other domesticated animal, think about all of them, horses, pigs, cows, goats, you name it, especially dogs, they have been markedly modified by us as we brought them into our world. The only one that hasn't is Felis sylvestris libica. That's the cat that sleeps on your bed. And this is a tabby cat who would stay a tabby. This is the particular pattern of a cat that needs to have a way to conceal themselves in the wild. And so if cats had their way, they'd all look like this. It's only those of us who found the orange or tabbies or tuxedo cats more attractive that they began to take on that kind of coloring. Otherwise, they'd stay exactly looking like this. They became our pets in Egypt, as I said, and we know that from hieroglyphics and some burial sites that we talked about, but they were the pets of the aristocrats. So if you were a wealthy part of the class system in Egypt, you had a cat that was a pet. If you were not, the cats became your snake hunter or your protector, because there were some very virulent animals, particularly a particular snake and a big rat that these cats protected the lower classes from. So they came to us in many respects in both ways for about 4,000 years ago. They started out, as I said, as a wild hunter. They became the opportunistic predator as we began to gather up grain. And then they became both the pest controller, the companion, and finally the symbol. they became the gods that they have never forgiven us for, and they will never forget. They spread around the world from there via agriculture. So as agriculture spread in all directions, both on boats and across land, these cats came with us. As I said, they are unchanged from where they were at that time, 10,000 years ago. And they evolved as consumers of prey. They have a specialized meat requirement that has evolved with them regarding high protein, low to moderate fat, and very minimal carbohydrates. So these specialized meat eaters, we call them a nutritional dead end because they cannot evolve now away from that requirement for meat protein. So they have unique needs for linoleic acid and linolenic acid. They require those, especially the conversion to arachidonic acid for reproduction and development. So they can make arachidonic acid in other forms, but it's an absolute requirement for babies to be born and the lineage to persist. They have some requirements for vitamins that they cannot formulate from other sources because they're preformed. So if a vitamin is in its usable form in the meat that you eat, you don't need to learn a way to make it for yourself. So vitamin A is preformed in meat. Vitamin D, they don't make it in the sun like we do, not because they have fur, but because they enzymatically activate it both in the liver, but especially in the kidneys. And niacin, again, is present in viscera, so they don't have any way to make it from tryptophan. And because of the way in which they create energy, they have 4 times the need for vitamin B6 and B1 and folate than dogs do. So in the omnivore, there is a lower requirement for all these vitamins. And what that means is we need to create diets for them that are very, very different. They evolved eating small prey. And the way that they figured out how to get the protein requirements that they needed is their brains would tell them if this skinny little mouse didn't quite give them enough protein, the next time they go and find a little bit bigger rabbit, and basically they would create a menu for themselves over time that had a target composition of 52% protein, 36% fat, and 12% carbohydrates. And so they would exchange prey in order to get to that optimal form of protein requirement. And the reason that they need so much protein is because they're unchanged from the times that we domesticated them and beyond that, more than 10,000 years ago, they have this requirement for protein that cannot be changed, and they can't turn it off. So the other thing we need to remember is because they have these unique requirements, they have only the ability to make energy from amino acids. So they cannot lose their protein requirement even if they get a limited protein diet. The other thing that's particularly interesting about cats is that they have special amino acid requirements that they can't make from anywhere else. Arginine for nitrogen excretion, cysteine and methionine for those beautiful hair coats. But my favorite one is felinine. Felinine is the sexual attraction that comes from that yummy, intact male urine. And what it means, apparently, is that the better accumulation of felinine was an indication that these male cats were better hunters and so better likely to be good mates and to create the next offspring that would be more powerful going forward. So felinine, as bad as it smells to us, the more powerful the male urine was when it hits the air is a function of felinine, and it was an indicator of how good of a hunter the males were. And of course, you all have read in textbooks about the absolute requirement for taurine that was discovered when it was in low enough quantities in the original cat foods in the 70s that cats developed, among other things, some cardiomyopathy. So they do have some very interesting differences, and they don't need carbohydrate. But how do we humans feed them? We feed them largely with dry food, and they just don't have an ability to use all the energy found in carbohydrates. They don't have any of it, any amylase. They have little glucokinase and very little lactase. So they just don't have the ability. They can use carbohydrate, but not nearly as efficiently as we'd like them to be able to, given how inexpensively and easily it is to create this type of cat food. Cats also have some fairly specific drivers for the biology of eating. Taste is particularly important, but it's done in conjunction with smell. They have both their normal smell, but also that vomeral nasal organ that actually somehow creates a combination of taste and smell that is a more dramatic way of tasting their food. And it's particularly adapted to meat. They don't have any ability to taste sugar, but they can tell sweet, because that gives them the ability to avoid the kind of sweetness that comes from rotting food. They're arid dwellers. They developed in a desert situation, so they are not very good drinkers. There's they get almost all of the moisture that they need from their prey, because like us, mice are about 60% water, so they just don't have the drive to consume a lot of water. So they'll eat more as the opportunity presents itself, and that becomes a problem in our younger cats because we tend to feed them freely. They will eat as they are driven to eat as much as they can in a particular opportunity, because there might be scarcity later. So what that drives is when they're fed more food than they need, they will continue to eat it, and we end up then, of course, with the obesity problem in younger cats. The other problem that we found, though, in the ethology studies of cats is that cats talk to us in a way that they don't talk to their counterparts, because we don't listen to them. There are other ways of communicating, so they tend to vocalize, and what humans seem to misinterpret that as a request for food. And so when they're maybe asking to go out or asking for attention, and so cats learn to talk to us more and therefore demand more food, and maybe learn how to get more opportunities to eat. And that's the opposite problem of the skinny cat, but it has its manifestations later, that as we've learned. Cats are also neophobic. They don't like change. No cats like their environment to change. So if you're changing the diet or introducing a particularly important medical diet, you need to make sure that these cats get changed to a new diet with the kind of comfort that they would normally need in order to feel like they could safely make this change. So you don't want to change everything else as well. So no new food bowls, new methods of feeding, new people feeding them, a new cat in the family. If you want to change a diet, try to keep everything else exactly the same going forward. Because what we want these cats to do is maintain their muscle mass. There's nothing more important than that, both in young cats and older ones, because muscle mass in the young cat contributes to obesity. And in the older cat contributes to a loss of bone mass and frailty. So what we want these cats to do is have the kind of muscle mass that you see here in this beautiful cat. So the message for cats is the same as it is for us. Eat enough protein and get some exercise. I want to show you some of the things that we now know in research done recently about cats to help you understand why muscle condition is so important. This was a study published in 2018 about the association between 9-point body condition scoring that I think you might find pretty interesting. And I'm glad you're going to have copies of this because it's important. This was 2,609 cats that were over a year of age. They were presented at a veterinarian at least twice over the course of 11 years. They were all neutered. The age to maximum body condition score occurred at five and a half years. most of these cats, 85% of them or so, were between a body condition score of 5, 6, or 7. And a quarter of them died during the period and were removed from the study. There were 799 young, 1391 old, and 400 middle-aged, and 491 old. So this is the this was the maximum body condition score for all the cats. And why that's important is that it's a little surprising, is that a body condition score of 3, 4, or 5 was a higher hazard for illness and resulted in a shorter lifespan. So, and in humans, that's mirrored because thinness is an independent risk for illness or a shorter lifespan. So on the low end was a higher hazard, but of course, as we all know, on the higher end, the body condition score of 9 is also a higher hazard. But what's really interesting is what we've always thought of as ideal maybe isn't quite so ideal in cats. You'll see in the picture, that's my dog in a cat bed on his own bed. This is the arrangement made by my cats who boss around this dog with impunity. So the take home here is a thin cat isn't going to live as long as a well-fed cat. And while that might seem obvious, we've always shot for that body condition score of 5, and maybe we ought to think a little differently about that. Because loss of muscle mass in the older cat requires a great deal more from them in terms of risk. So if we have a slower metabolism, slower energy burning on the low end or in the younger cats, we might be able to prevent obesity if we increase the amount of protein they get. And the other part of it we need to keep in mind is that their protein requirement for immune function is really significant. And in cats, because they can't turn off their need for producing energy from amino acids, a protein loss may end up in immune compromise in older cats. So here's what used to be thought of as the appropriate way to determine how much protein cats need. And that was the nitrogen balance theory. And that came to a conclusion based upon nitrogen in and nitrogen out, which is supposed to create the acid-base balance, pardon me, that cats needed about 23% protein in their diet on a dry matter basis. So they figured out that 30% seemed like a good number. So AVCO, however, said, and these are the, AVCO, as you know, are the American Association of Feed Control Officials, and they decided that 26% protein on a dry matter basis was just about right for creating cat foods. The National Research Council said even less, or 2.5 to 3 grams per kilogram. 26% protein on a dry matter basis is about 6.5 grams of protein per 100 kcals if you calculate it that way. So both of the advisors on creating cat food came up with these very low levels of protein. So here's the new study. These protein needs were based on actual measurements in a group of cats of fat, muscle, and bone. In this group of cats, any of them that consumed less than 5.2 grams of protein per kilogram lost weight. It turns out that cats need about 12 grams of protein per 100 kcals. Remember, that's quite a bit more than the previous slide in order to maintain their muscle. So that comes out to a 40 to 45% protein on a dry matter basis. So dry matter means it doesn't matter whether it's canned or dry food. Once you take the moisture out of the food and calculate the amount of protein, it all should come between 40 and 45% protein in order to maintain lean body mass. So if cats consumed less than that, they lost lean body mass in this study. So that gives you an idea of how dramatically different the requirements for cats are. Now that doesn't mean that I'm entirely advocating for an all canned food diet. I'm not. Because what I did was I went and I got one of the most expensive canned cat foods I could find, one of the most expensive, high-end, over-the-counter cat foods that are typically only sold in pet stores. and a prescription canned food diet for adults. And as you can see, the one with the red marker for calories, the lowest one was the one labeled tiki, which also, if you look below that, had the highest level of protein. So the lowest calories ended up with the highest level of protein. So that kind of blows up some of the things that people have said about protein and weight gain. The fat amount in the higher protein diet was right in the middle and had very, very few carbs and therefore the lowest calories. So it's not just a matter of feeding a canned food diet, but it's finding the one that has the higher level of protein. The two out of three of them had more than 50% protein, and one of them had considerably less. So on the one hand, when there's inadequate protein, there's obesity. On the other, we end up with what we call sarcopenia, or poverty of the flesh. And that's starting into aging at a deficit. And the reason that that's a problem is that as the more and more challenges come with aging, we have no cats over 12 years old with one problem. We always have multiple comorbidities in these cats. And if they start into aging underweight, they really have a less likelihood of doing well. Because as aging happens, other things happen. In cats, it's been demonstrated that many cats are less able to digest fat and protein efficiently, or as efficiently as they did before. Their ability to smell begins to decline, taste buds aren't quite as acute, and the digestion of some essential nutrients declines. So what we found is that cats that are older need about 25% better appetite or better calorie consumption in order to compensate for these deficits as they go into aging. You'll see on the right, that's Woody. He's 21 years old and has many, many things going on. And he happens to be mine, so I have to manage him. You're all familiar with this. This is the Purina body condition score we've been using for years and years and years, 1 to 9. It's based on mostly visuals. This is the one I think is more important. This is the World Small Animal Veterinary Association muscle condition score for cats. And I'm going to blow it up a little bit for you because I think it's really important for you to use this. Go to their website and use this in every medical record that you create for every cat every time, from the time they're young, so that you can follow them as they grow older and evaluate the caliber of muscle that they have. The normal muscle mass is a 0 up to severe muscle loss is a 3. And if you palpate the places that are shown by the arrows, the top of the back, the dorsal spinous processes, the nuchal crest between the ears, and the muscles of the back legs, you will be able to evaluate over time the presence and palpation of the bones underneath those muscles and get a feeling for what muscle condition scoring is all about. This is far more important in my mind than body condition scoring, especially in older cats, because most cats live with other cats and most cats are fed together. And so the gradual weight loss or loss of body condition or muscle condition score is very often unnoticed by the owner, particularly in a multiple cat household. So it may be very hard to find the nutritional history that you really need. So this muscle condition scoring will give you an ability to counsel owners when you start to see a loss of it. Because it's a roller coaster. Cats gain weight until they're about 11 years old. Their energy requirement then starts to increase after 11. So they begin to lose muscle mass after 12. And the loss at 15 years is apparently as much as 1/3 of their lean body mass. So even fat cats can lose muscle. So muscle condition scoring is really the key to assessing the successful aging in these older cats. This is a study that was done in colonies of cats in one of our cat food manufacturers over time, and it gives you the way in which the energy requirements change in cats as they age. And you can see it drops down until they reach about 11, and then it begins to rise again. And that is basically their energy requirement as time goes on. And this is colonies of cats where this has been demonstrated. So here is with some color added so that you can see what happens and see the curve as cats grow older. They need more energy and not less. So these senior diets that are formulated with fewer calories aren't really at all what these cats need. This is another study that was done in one of the big pet food manufacturers, and this was the daily energy intake in cats and kcals per kilogram of body weight. And you can see that they needed more calories as they age. These were all normal body condition scored cats, but their need for energy begins to increase. And this is where it gets really important, because what happens is their weight begins to decline at 11 and it declines precipitously as they grow older. So we need to think differently about how we feed cats in order to maintain their best health. This is another study that was done to show the declining fat digestibility in cats. So as they grow older, the incidence of fat digestibility goes up. So as they reach the 12 to 14 year old cats, their fat digestibility begins to decline as much as over 30%. So these cats really need to be fed differently in terms of their ability to digest their food. This is also the incidence of decreased protein digestibility in cats. 1 in 5 cats over the age of 14 has a reduced ability to digest protein. So that means they need high quality protein that's more easily digestible, and they need more of it. Just some more, and I know I'm racing through this, but you're going to be able to see all of this when you get the copy of this, and that's why there's so many slides in this, because I wanted you to have all this data so that you can demonstrate to your colleagues why it's so important for these cats to be fed differently, and to strongly consider how these cats are fed in terms of their amount of protein and the digestibility. Because as you can see, the less they weigh, the faster they die. And all of these are different ways in which cats experience mortality. It's independent of the disease that killed them. So it's a really important consideration when you think about how many of our cats are so much older. This is again a lean tissue in cats. There were 256 cats that were studied over their lifetime, and this gives you the kind of trends that we see in cats as they age. So their nutritional requirements change. So as we said earlier, healthy young cats needed about 5 grams per kilogram of protein per day. Older cats, we think now, need more. 22% of cats over 14 years of age had decreased protein digestibility. A third of cats had a decreased fat digestibility. They need to eat more food. We also need to know the nutrient profiles of the food that we're feeding. So we need to use nutrition as medicine, particularly in felines, so that we can preserve their quality of life as they grow older. And lastly, here's 85 seniors studied for 7 years. So this was a colony of cats where they knew the entire life curve of these cats, and they needed more kcals at the age of 10 to 15 years, and in spite of being fed more, weight loss occurred and hastened after 13, which is of course a predictor of death. So we really do need to worry about skinny old cats. So when you talk to your clients and when you think about feeding them, know the calories in the food, tailor it to the body condition and life stage of that particular cat, and try to decrease the amount of ad lib feeding. I mean, we really do need to get the carbohydrates out of these cats' lives. And the way to do that is with frequent small meals and high digestibility. High biologic value protein, that is simply a fancy word for saying meat. You can get amino acids from peas and potatoes and other other places, but the high biological value protein is animal protein. And I do think that in most cases, canned food, because it has a high level of water, and we talked about how cats don't drink enough, it is, its protein source is generally animal protein, and there's a lower calorie density. So if you're trying to feed for a body condition score of 6, which in my opinion now is the ideal body condition score, you want to have a lower calorie density food that has a lower carbohydrate profile in younger cats, and then more energy or more digestibility consideration as the cats gets older. The other thing we need to know is what people are feeding. Cats develop particular preferences for flavors. We need to know, as I demonstrated to you earlier, what brands of food. It's not just canned food, it's what brand, what is the protein profile in that food, the types of food they're feeding and the quantity. And this is more important, of course, when they're younger, but whether these cats are fed an unbalanced diet because they get a lot of treats or table food. The thing that I'm seeing a lot of now is not only the feeding of supplements, where if they can get their cats to adjust them, but also these weird trends in food that people think that grain-free now is the way to go. Well, if you're a cat food manufacturer and your clients are trying to be grain-free, you're going to make grain-free food and sell it. But what you're going to do is you're going to substitute that carbohydrate for something that's not carbohydrate, like rice or potatoes. I mean, that's not, sorry, grain. So the trends and marketing in cat food is something that we need to be aware of, but we need to counsel in opposition to, because the fads are really not the way to evaluate a diet. The other thing that happens as cats get older is that they end up having a lot of different things happen to them. The radiograph you see at the top, as you might imagine, this was a cat who was experiencing some weight loss. So if you see weight loss in an increase or unchanged diet, you may have a maldigestion or protein loss to consider. And maldigestion in older cats, I think, is a chronic way of life for them. They just aren't able to digest nutrients the way they used to be. If you have weight loss and a decreased appetite, you may have some systemic disease or something that's inciting them not to eat as much. So you need to work these cats up completely and not assume, as clients very often do, that it's a function of them growing tired of the food they're eating or anything like that. We need to be concise and develop a plan for working these cats up fully. The thing that keep an eye on going forward is there may be some potential value as we investigate the trends of creatine kinase in serum, because those may be able to give us some idea of whether we're beginning to see some protein losing problems in these cats. That's still under investigation, but stay tuned. It may be a tool that we'll have in the future. So the other part of it is the environment. In my world, it's more important that she eats than what she eats. And that's because so many of my cats have chronic kidney disease and other problems that may be beginning to affect their ability or desire to eat. The other thing is multi-cat households. We need to be able to feed these cats in such a way that there is no competition. And we can't, if we're changing diets for medical reasons, we need to try to make those foods as familiar and similar as they can. There was a fad not too long ago about whisker fatigue that you may have all heard of. And it is true that whiskers are vibrissae. They're very sensitive. They are not hair. They're not really whiskers. They are really sensitive organs. And so I do think that it may be helpful in some cats to use a dinner plate instead of a big bowl, deep bowl. Cats also, as you might imagine, because they eat mice, they do like their food to be either room temperature or a little bit warm, because that's how they have evolved eating in the wild. Some of these cats, it's helpful to add moisture to make them more inclined to eat. I haven't decided whether cats are really, really much care whether we think that they should be eating or not. So I'm not sure whether our petting or praise is something that we've made up ourselves or something they really enjoy. Here's another study that was done that I wanted you to see. It turns out that a greater than 6% weight loss is a clinical sign. In this 9-year study, that as these cats, the faster they lost weight, the faster they died. So total lean body mass, increased fat mass, and percent of bone density and body condition score were all associated in this study with survival. So the more muscle we can keep on these cats, the healthier they're going to remain. This is another study, though, that talks a little bit about some of the ingredients that you need to look for in your cat formulas. This was 3 groups of cats that were all fed the same baseline food. In the first group was fed the baseline food plus an antioxidant. As you'll find in most of these foods, I'll have vitamin E as a preservative, so that's considered an antioxidant. In the second group, the cats were fed the baseline diet with antioxidants and then prebiotic fiber. And in the third group, they were fed all those 3 things plus long-chain polyunsaturated fatty acids. And the cats fed the baseline diet with all 3 supplements had an increased quality of life and a longer life. So when you're investigating the formulations of these foods, that also matters. So what do we need? How do we need to feed these cats? We need to feed them a highly digestible, energy-dense diet. And as might be surprising to many people who recommend senior diets, these cats may have nutritional needs that are much closer to a kitten. And then the final consideration, as cats grow older, most of them will develop some challenges to their kidney function. And so increasing the amount of water that they're fed over time can be also very helpful. That may not be a consideration in kittens, but it certainly is a consideration in older cats. The other thing that we're seeing too in these cats that are fed these high carbohydrate, protein deficient diets are some health problems that you might find in your cats that you may have missed in terms of their relationship to the diet. The protein deficiencies are sometimes protein losing nephropathy or enteropathy, but they can also be inadequate protein in the diet. Same thing is true for the essential fatty acids that they require, and some of the other things that we talked about, like copper, zinc, and vitamins. And cats do have food allergies, so adverse food reactions, and some of the supplements that people feed are not effective and may be compounding these problems. And the last thing that I wanted to show you, this is a cat that I thought had a nutritional deficiency because of that dry, flaky coat. It turns out that some cats actually manifest pyoderma in this way. So if you're having trouble controlling a cat who's suddenly developed really dry, flaky skin, think about culturing these guys or doing some skin scraping for pyoderma, because some of these patients did really well for me after I recognized that cats and dogs get skin infections that appear quite differently. We don't know why cats get the kind of dental and oral disease that they do, but it appears that some of these ingredients may confound the progression of dental disease, particularly in cats. It may have something to do with some of these supplements, and it may be worthwhile paying attention as we go forward to the research that's being done on dental disease in cats. The tooth resorption issue in cats is particularly disturbing because it very often occurs below the gum line, and so we can miss what may be a very significant and painful problem in cats just because we aren't able to see it without the benefit of radiographs. So we need to get to the bottom of what the nutritional relationship is between dental and oral disease in cats and some of these supplements. We talked a little bit about hydration, and I think in our older cats, this is a gigantic issue that we can help to address in creative ways. Some cats will not drink as much in the presence of some competition. They are much more inclined to fight for their food than they are to fight for their water. And so having multiple water stations in multiple cat households will really help these cats be willing to drink in an environment where in other cases there may be too much competition. Of course, we already talked about canned food. The other things that I think can be helpful is flavored water, and that's tuna water right out of the can. You can take that canned tuna, squeeze the water out of it, and have the client fill it with more purified water and create their own additional tuna water. So it doesn't have to be an expensive choice. The other things that are helpful are clam juice out of the can, chicken broth for some cats, beef broth, and those kinds of things. I like to add moisture even to canned foods. In my older cats, we try to gradually add more water or some form of broth or fluid to it to create a more diluted form so that they'll continue to consume more moisture. Water fountains for some cats are very helpful. And some cats, as we talked about earlier, they do like their food warm, and that's also true for their water. Subcutaneous fluids should not be a last resort. We have a lot of clients who, with good instruction and careful planning, can give subcutaneous fluids at home. It does not help their chronic kidney disease, but it sure as heck does make them feel a whole lot better. The other thing that I wanted to talk briefly about is one of the things that I find very disturbing, especially given what I've just told you about protein and cats, and that there was some studies that tried to do protein restriction on cats that were at risk for proteinuria. Turns out that in the one study, the protein restriction caused hypokalemia, and these cats developed proteinuria, which resolved with potassium supplementation. And a high protein diet in another study with enough potassium, they did not develop proteinuria. So a high protein diet does not cause proteinuria in cats. If you read nothing else about protein in older cats, this is from Veterinary Clinics of North America, Small Animal Practice, Controversies in Veterinary Nephrology, Renal Diets. And this is an exhaustive look at all of the evidence that was used to support protein restriction in chronic kidney disease in cats. And the evaluation of every piece of research that's been done is there is inadequate evidence to support protein restriction in cats, even in cats with chronic kidney disease. So some of the mythology around protein restriction in cats with kidney disease is really something you really need to be look at critically. Once again, let's go back to what we talked about earlier. These cats came to us and they are unchanged from their obligate carnivore state. We know now that the lower the body weight, the faster they die. Increased dietary protein slows the loss of lean body mass. Older cats need more protein. Minimizing lean body mass loss, so measuring lean body mass every visit, every time, will help your older patients live longer. There is a great deal more research done in human chronic kidney disease than there is in cats. In the omnivorous diet, there is no benefit of protein restriction. So remember, in the omnivore, humans and dogs can create energy from something other than protein. And still, there's no benefit of protein restriction in chronic kidney disease. Renal injury in cats can be reduced with phosphorus restriction alone. So if you feed a diet that has ample protein in it, and these cats start having elevations in their phosphorus, you can preserve their kidney function by simply giving them Amphigel, and that will help preserve what's left of their kidney disease. So here's what, I don't feed renal diets. It's certainly not early. The phosphorus restriction is how to do it, because this will eliminate all of the things that I've seen in older cats, particularly the anemia of chronic disease, muscle wasting, decreases in plasma protein and nutritional problems that cause other medical conditions. So when you think about feline nutrition, you need to think differently about how they're fed, and to combat some of the marketing problems that we have in the big companies, you need to be able to talk to them about what their cats should really eat. Here's some other work that's been done on weight loss. Older humans lose weight despite not any decline in intake. So you can see that there's this change in the efficiency of the ability to metabolize nutrients. The loss of lean body condition and adipose is completely unrelated to the amount of food taken in. Cachexia is the metabolic alteration that nobody really understands too well yet, and that's different than sarcopenia. That cachexia is the tumor effects, the derangement of metabolism, and the altered cytokines that comes from chronic disease. We still don't know what that means in cats, but we do know that it is the same difference between sarcopenia or the loss of muscle and the cachexia that comes with chronic disease. Those are different things. They need to be managed differently. Cancer at cats, and this was a study done, a 9-point body condition score using the normal body condition score, a fat score, and a muscle score. In these cats that had cancer, 44% had a body condition score of less than 5. If they 72% had a body condition score with moderate to severe muscle wasting. The higher the body condition score, the longer these cats lived, even in the presence of cancer. In lymphoma, the body condition score of greater than 5 had a higher incidence of remission. So remember, in these small cell lymphomas, we can get really good remission rates, but these cats have to have a good body condition score to have high odds of being able to do that. This is another one of lymphoma alone, and these cats also, the more they maintain their body weight, the longer they lived, and the higher their quality of life. This is a longitudinal study. These were cats that died of a whole lot of different things. And I know I'm racing through this, but I want you to have this so that you can see how important it is, particularly in older cats in the presence of disease. And all of my patients have something that the longer I can maintain a muscle condition score of 0 or 1, the better these cats will do over time. The other part of this is we know now that the cognitive dysfunction is also a problem that can happen in older cats. And so you need to be able to talk to your clients about the changes that may occur that can affect the way in which these cats are willing to eat. This was my Woody. He was beginning to lose his hearing. And so we had his water drip into a stainless steel pan so that he could locate it because it made a really loud noise. And those kinds of modifications to an environment are easy to do if you can have that conversation with your clients. So work them up. Make sure that their food isn't being placed on top of the clothes washer, and these cats have osteoarthritis. Make sure you're checking out all of these things. Don't assume that it's a problem of diet. Assume it's a problem of something else until proven otherwise. So make sure that you run through your comprehensive workup to make sure these cats get the care they need, and then talk about nutrition at the same time. So maybe not senior diets, small frequent meals, energy dense, meat, protein, and avoid a protein calorie malnutrition. And really what these cats need is much more like a kitten-like diet. So think about that. Now, my last piece of data is a piece of research I did on my own. And I went in and looked at 38 food lines, premium veterinary and grocery store varieties. And of those canned food lines, 25 or 40% of them had, or 65% of them rather, had less than 40% protein on a dry matter basis. So this is not a pitch for canned food. This is a pitch for you to know what you're feeding your patients so that you can preserve a good, long, healthy life for them for the foreseeable future. And remember that esophagostomy tubes are not a last resort. Place them early, they can be removed, and they will save lives. Now I'm ready for some questions, and Carolyn has a couple things to say. I think.
Nope, I'm right here. So fabulous, and thank you so much. I'm just going to point out the slide that's up now, and then we'll go to questions. The slide that's up is showing us some CE offers that you're getting for attending today, including an extra 15% off, deferred billing, and I'll leave you to read the rest. If you have questions after we end today, you can certainly ask us both questions that we could push to Dr. Colleran and also questions about product. info@assisianimalhealth.com. So that is a wonderful email for you. And now I will go directly to questions. Dr. Colleran, number one, is there a significant enough benefit of added moisture to cats who won't eat canned to try the new Purina Hydrocare in an otherwise healthy older cat?
I am just over the moon about that product. Deb Greco, who it was part of the development team, is a colleague of mine, and I think that in cats that will accept it and like it, it is the best thing to add. Now, that doesn't mean that you should replace the water bowl with it. They call it third bowl for a reason. If cats are willing to and enjoy it and accept it, it can be a terrific way to add moisture to a healthy cat's diet.
Okay, thank you for that. Vitamins and minerals in dental disease slide are the IU/keg cited for keg of food or keg of cat? Thank you.
Kilogram of cat, sorry.
Okay. Another, so I am feeling a bit outdated, but is the concept that we need to decrease protein for CRF wrong?
In my opinion, it is. One of the things that is shown from the examination of the research is that these cats lose lean body condition as their protein is restricted in the diet. And that balance is lost. And so in chronic kidney disease, I don't believe that especially not in IRIS stage 1 and 2, and maybe in the 2.5, that these cats should have protein restricted diets. But there are other things one needs to do, particularly monitor phosphorus and control it.
Okay, what diet do you recommend for stage 2, 3, 4 renal disease patients?
Oh, I'd probably get shot on sight if I used a particular brand. But I will tell you that one of the things that one of the slides said, it's more important that she eats than what she eats. And one of the things I found in a lot of my cats with comorbidities is that they have peculiar or particular texture desires and taste desires. And if they are in any way reluctant to eat a prescription diet that I think they should try, I don't have them do it. We will try to make a diet adjustment, but if they will eat more protein and more calories on a diet they prefer, I would rather they did that.
Okay, what is your opinion about commercially prepared raw diets for cats?
Cats are very, very texture driven as well as taste and smell driven. So it depends. I think in households where there is some immune compromise in the family members who are very young or very old, that the concerns about raw feeding are legitimate. I think that there's work being done now, particularly by some very, very good companies to adapt to that kind of requirement. But once again, I think texture and taste are really big drivers, more so in cats and dogs. And so if they're willing to accept it and it has all of the ingredients at the ratios we talked about in this talk, then I'm not going to object to it.
You mentioned Amphogel. How do you feel about Epikitten?
Well, I am for a lot of reasons particularly an unpublished study that was done a number of years ago. I use bucket loads of calcitriol in 100% of my chronic kidney disease cats, and because of that, I can't use Epikitten because it has calcium in it.
Okay. This is a cute question. What do you feed your cats, Dr. Colleran?
I can't say, because in many of the states that you all are sitting in, there are open carry laws.
You feed them guns? Oh, goodness. Okay. Are you willing or able to make comments about the disturbing to me in brackets trend by otherwise compassionate clinicians to feed companion animals, including cats, a strict vegetarian diet?
Cats cannot be vegetarians. It is absolutely appalling that anyone would even think that an obligate carnivore, a carnivore that has reached a nutritional dead end, they absolutely have a requirement for meat that cannot be adjusted. We did not modify these cats' DNA over the last 10,000 years. That's why I talked about it at the beginning. It's so important to recognize that these cats cannot eat that kind of food.
I have a 16-year-old cat that has OA in stage 2 KD. He is losing weight, moderate muscle loss, has checked his remaining teeth, which don't seem painful. He used to be on JD canned, which he ate consistently, but now not. He will not eat any of the kidney diets. I have tried baby food, Purina Essentials. I have tried different temperatures. Is there a food out there that you have had great success with in these cats that won't eat anything else? I'm considering an E2.
I would not shy away from an esophagostomy tube, at least on a temporary basis, until you can figure out a way to improve this cat's willingness to eat. We've had some success with some of the higher protein diets. If the cat will eat canned food, eat, some of the more readily available protein, high protein diets are diets like Purina Pro Plan. I had one of my very own chronic kidney disease cats would not eat dry food. He ate DM until the Purina DM at 50% protein until the day he died at 22 of lymphoma. So there's, continuing to try. Now, the other thing that this is not a sponsored product, but I use Mirataz a lot while I'm trying to get these cats to modify how they eat.
What are your thoughts on stanozolol in cats with CKD?
Oh man, I have never used it. That predates me. The anabolic steroids have not been used for a lot of reasons for a long time in cats.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, on this, you will receive a copy of Dr. Colleran's entire presentation, so you will have many opportunities to use it as a reference for yourself.